tried from the beginning to have something that was of local interest all the time. And so that's the way we began with news, and it was a long time before we really got to full-time news. That wasn't until Chet Burgess graduated from Washington and Lee Journalism School. I had him come up as an intern.
We set out to see if a little radio station in a little tiny town could possibly generate enough news and information material to warrant, having a full-time person.
And I knew by the end of the first day there was, because he knew how to find the news. And so when he finished at Washington and Lee, he called me again. He said, "All right, I'm through. You had two choices. One is I go to work for the Roanoke newspapers or something, or I come to work for you."
And he said, "Well, let me talk to my accountant. I'll call you back tomorrow."
And I said, "Oh, Lord, how am I going to afford this high-priced college graduate journalism?" So I said, "Let me just think about it for a little bit." And I decided I could not afford to pass him up. I just couldn't do it. Man, it was a big salary, I think $125, and that was a week.
And he said, "We think we can do this. I could offer you $100 a week for 6 months. And at the end of that time, we'll have to look at news-related sales. If we've generated enough additional revenue to cover the expenses, then we'll make it permanent." So I turned down $165 a week, a company car, and an expense account with a landmark newspaper, and packed up, and we headed toward Orange.
But he just did a remarkably good job. Energetic as all get out.
Nobody told me you can't do that. Arch Harrison certainly never once criticized me for trying something new that didn't work. The fact that we were pioneering was really great. And I think that experience served me well when I came to Atlanta in 1980 and we were starting up CNN. Because again, we were in a situation doing something that no one had ever done before. And I got very comfortable at WJMA with inventing a way to do something that hadn't been done before. And that's what we did, especially most of the first couple of years, but even most of the first decade of CNN was a process of invention. And having done it on a very small scale at WJMA, I didn't have any problem inventing on the fly.
Chet had given me my first opportunity as a stringer, and then of course he was offered the job with WTAR. And I was there and I was available, and I had maybe 3 Gordonsville Town Council meetings under my belt. And so they offered me the job. We had a whole team. It was Patricia McCarver, myself, Barbara Potter, Mitzi Clark. I mean, this was a team of people dedicated towards bringing you news from this small region of Virginia. That's a pretty good commitment for a small radio station. That's a heck of an investment in news. I mean, that gives you an idea of where Arch's head was at as far as the newspapers, as far as the radio station was concerned.
And I can remember my first session with Arch Harrison and his talking about what he did with Radio Orange and what his goals were and how he operated the station. And I thought, this is a man I want to be associated with.
She was one of those who did more in one day than the other person had done in the previous 7 months, it seems to me, and is a really fine reporter. And I remember checking up on her background. I called a news editor down at the Atlanta Constitution because she had been working as a stringer for them. And he said, she has a passion for accuracy. I never had to check back up on anything she did because it was right. She was a super journalist, a good writer and tenacious. But she'd have stuff on the air at 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning for the previous night's meeting somewhere. Was just wonderful. So we were really blessed with 2 talented news people, and we just never looked back. And then you've got that wonderful photograph of him and his harem. Oh, man. that was good times.
She and I had a great partnership because, first of all, I am not a morning person, and she is. And so she volunteers to come down there at 5:30 in the morning. I'm saying, go for it, girl, because I'm looking at the back of my eyeballs at 5:30 in the morning. And so here we had, a news person on staff by 6 a.m. Unbelievable.
I can remember we clicked right away. He was doing Orange County, and then he did, of course, the major news programs, and I would feed him copy from Madison County and do some on-the-air work or recordings of the stories. And our styles were complementary.
It was absolutely an NPR-style news operation. I mean, think about it. I mean, we would have a full half hour of news from 12 to 12:30, most of it locally generated. A full half hour of news from 5 to 5:30 every evening.
This is the WJMA Evening Report, the Central Virginia Daily News for the 6th day in June, Friday. A wrap-up of today's news, sports, business news, and the weather. With the news, here's Phil Odiebear.
Good afternoon. The temperatures are 24 and 75 degrees at 5. In the news, Truman, Eisenhower, Nixon, and Ford all knew what it was like to have their presidential veto overridden by Congress. Today, President Carter found out, too.
I would do stories, that were 2.5 minutes long, news stories, 2.5 minutes long, with multiple actualities. And was never told, hey, you need to cut this back to a minute. Max. 30 seconds, that's all we need on it. Never was told that. Putting out feature stories that were 5 minutes in length. Putting out radio documentaries that lasted an hour.
I did Madison County. Willa Drinkwater, who was known then as Barbara Potter, did Louisa County, and she would cover their planning commissions. And what I remember she was really talented about was covering the issues that they had in Louisa County regarding growth. And then Mitzi Clark, who had worked for the Chicago Tribune before. She and her husband Champ moved to Greene County, where he was affiliated with the University of Virginia, and she started covering Greene County. And she loved Greene County as much as I loved Madison County.
And she had just a tremendous journalism background, having worked up on Capitol Hill in Washington for decades and retired to Greene County.
And her triumph was the day the courthouse blew up in Greene County. She was there and got hold of the only working telephone. And all of these high-tech, high-priced journalists were around there standing in line while Missy said, well, that's so. I thought, that's just fine. That is really enterprise reporting.
And we just started talking to as many people as we could, getting descriptions. How did this happen? What did you see? What records in there were destroyed? What are the plans for replacing the courthouse functions? The story just went all over the place.
We won News Operation of the Year award a couple of times. Once under Chet's tenure, and at least once more under my tenure, and I think once again under Patricia McCarver's after I left and went to the newspaper. Arch was very supportive of the idea of taking time to make a good awards, contest entry. I know that I was there 10 years and I won Best Feature of the Year every year that I was there because I just loved doing feature stories.
Lord, the news we ran, and Monday at 1 had a big chunk of public service content. We never tried to sell that. It was just there because it ought to be there. It's kind of nice if somebody wants to sponsor it or something, but mainly it ought to be there.
That Monday at 1 program, that won the Douglas Southall Freeman Award for Public Service Through Journalism several times.
We had a news department that I think could rival any local news department in any radio station anywhere.
You can get your news from around the world, but no one, from a variety of sources, but no one is going to give you the news from around the corner. And that's what we did. We gave the news from around the corner. And that's what made us feel so vital, I think, as far as the community was concerned.
As I recall, I was given totally free rein, and I think that was one of the reasons I loved it so much. And maybe because I had worked in radio before, I knew that there were certain must-dos you have in covering a community and the kinds of issues that were important.
But, it was the greatest place in the world to work. It was fabulous. It was motivating. You wake up in the morning jazzed, absolutely jazzed, taking a shower. What am I going to do today? What am I going to do today?
Arch would come on after the noon news, for example, and offer a personal commentary, sometimes on the news, sometimes just on a subject that interested him. You knew that he wasn't just trying to, in fact, he really wasn't deliberately trying to entertain you. He was thinking about something, and he wanted to tell you what he was thinking. Arch was a thinking man's radio station operator.
I felt that there was a case where I could be the voice of the station, the community. And I found that a lot of people said, I really like to have you on the air doing the news at noon, because that's one way I know that everything is all right. But it did. I felt that was a role that management ought to play.
He still, to this day, has the greatest reading voice I have ever heard. It's not pretentious, it's not these pear-shaped tones, but, when Arch would give his postscript to the news, it was just like a friend talking to you in your ear. It was great.
One of the things I miss when I come home from the beach is the sound of the surf, but not anymore. I brought some with me. Sometimes eternal truths manifest themselves while you're on vacation in a cottage at the beach. Ants in the kitchen tend to make you a neater housekeeper. Ants eaten in moderation don't seem to affect the taste of food very much.
Those were pieces of art, audio art that he did every day. And he always had such a wonderful, precise, descriptive way of expressing activities or actions or people.
There was a man who had died who worked for the town of Orange, riding on the back of a trash truck. And Arch detailed this man's life and what he did, and you would have thought MacArthur had died. And the guy spent his life riding on the back of a trash truck. But that was Arch's gift.
I like doing those because, as you know from another old saying, is that a lady particularly is only in the news 3 times: when she is born, when she gets married, and when she dies. And a lot of people are in the same category in a community like Orange. They were mainly, when they died was when they were in the news. And so I wanted to recognize the contributions to people. Some were great, others were just nice, humble, get-along folks. So that was the idea of the postscript to go along with the news. And it made a nice little complete package. And sometimes it'd go on for a long, long time.